In 2026, a law is coming, and Bugatti, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Rolls-Royce, every single luxury car manufacturer in Europe has been fighting to stop it. They have spent millions lobbying against.
In 2026, a major shift is arriving that Europe's most elite car makers tried everything to stop. Brands like Bugatti, Lamborghini, Ferrari, and Rolls-Royce poured millions into lobbying, legal challenges, and political pressure campaigns to block it. Their lawyers objected at every stage, and industry groups sent repeated warnings to governments across Europe. None of it worked. The law passed anyway, and when it fully comes into force, it will overturn something that seemed untouchable just a few years ago. It will legally require manufacturers, yes, even Bugatti, to sell genuine factory parts to independent repair shops, not just their tightly controlled dealer networks. For the first time, a skilled mechanic outside the official system will have the same access to components as factory technicians. To understand why this law exists, you have to look at a very specific moment that exposed the imbalance. It revolves around Matt Armstrong and a wrecked Bugatti Chiron that most of the industry believed should never be rebuilt. The car had been written off, essentially declared beyond saving. Bugatti's own stance was that such a vehicle should be scrapped. But Matt Armstrong decided otherwise and began documenting the rebuild publicly. What followed became one of the most widely watched automotive rebuild stories online, not just because of the challenge, but because of what happened when he tried to do things properly. He needed genuine parts, the exact components Bugatti itself uses. Those parts existed. Bugatti produces replacements for every element of the Chiron, and authorized dealers can order them without issue. But when an independent builder tried to buy them, even with money ready, the answer was no. Not unavailable, just inaccessible. The refusal wasn't about supply, it was about control. That single situation highlighted a broader issue: manufacturers deciding who is allowed to repair a product, even when someone legally owns it. This is precisely the kind of restriction the new EU Directive is designed to eliminate. The legislation, formally known as EU Directive 2024/1799, passed with overwhelming support in June 2024 and becomes fully enforceable by July 31st, 2026. Its structure is straightforward, but powerful, targeting the main ways manufacturers have historically controlled repairs. First is the obligation to repair. Companies must offer repair services at reasonable prices and within reasonable timeframes. They can't push customers toward buying new products instead. And they can't use software locks or hardware tricks to make independent repairs impossible. That last point is especially important for companies like Tesla, whose repair ecosystem heavily relies on proprietary software and remote control systems. Second is the requirement to provide parts, tools, and technical information. Manufacturers must supply these, not just to their official dealers, but also to qualified independent repairers, and at fair prices. They can't quietly inflate costs for independents while giving discounts to their own network. This directly addresses what happened in the Bugatti case, where access wasn't just restricted, it was denied outright. Under the new law, that kind of refusal becomes illegal. The third element goes even further. Manufacturers cannot block the use of second-hand or third-party parts, all provided they meet safety standards. They also cannot refuse to repair a vehicle simply because it was previously worked on outside their network. This clause alone dismantles a long-standing practice where cars effectively became blacklisted after independent work. It also challenges design strategies meant to discourage repair, like using proprietary connectors or permanent adhesives instead of removable components. The Bugatti example became so influential because it stripped away the usual justification of consumer protection. When you're dealing with cars worth millions, owned by some of the wealthiest individuals in the world, it's difficult to argue that restricting repair choices is about safeguarding vulnerable customers. If anything, the situation showed that the restrictions were about maintaining control over a lucrative service ecosystem. Had safety truly been the concern, Bugatti could have provided guidance or oversight during the rebuild. Instead, they withheld access entirely. Industry groups like the European Automobile Manufacturers Association argued against the directive on three main fronts: safety, intellectual property, and quality. Safety concerns focused on the complexity of vehicles like the Chiron, which require specialized knowledge. That argument isn't entirely baseless, but the law doesn't open the doors to unqualified work. It specifies qualified independent repairers, meaning those with proper training and equipment. Manufacturers still define the standards, but they can't make those standards impossible to meet outside their own network. While on intellectual property, companies claimed that sharing parts would expose proprietary engineering. The directive counters this by distinguishing between supplying a part and revealing how it's made. Providing a component doesn't mean disclosing the design process behind it. And on quality, manufacturers argued that independent channels might compromise standards. The response is simple. If the same genuine parts are being used, quality remains consistent regardless of who installs them. The impact of this law extends far beyond hypercars. It affects everyday brands like BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volkswagen Group, all of which have used software restrictions and limited tool access to keep repairs within their networks. For regular car owners, this means more competition and potentially lower costs. Independent shops will be able to offer genuine parts repairs at prices that challenge dealership markups, which often range significantly above trade rates. For high-end vehicles, the shift is even more noticeable. Owners of performance cars will have more viable alternatives to expensive dealership servicing. And in the rarefied world of hypercars, it opens the door for independent expertise to develop legally and commercially for the first time. Rebuilding something like a Chiron will never be easy, but the artificial barriers that once made it nearly impossible are being removed. This transition is happening alongside the rise of electric vehicles, where repair challenges are even more concentrated. EV battery systems are complex and expensive, often costing tens of thousands to replace. Manufacturers have designed these systems with software layers that limit independent access, especially for tasks like module-level repairs. The EU's battery regulations, working alongside the Right to Repair Directive, aim to change that by requiring designs that allow for repair and by mandating access to necessary software tools. Even outside the EU, the effects will be felt. The UK already has similar principles in place, and global supply chains make it impractical for manufacturers to create entirely separate systems for different regions. In the United States, momentum is building as well, with growing public support and legislative progress pushing in the same direction. Manufacturers aren't likely to accept this quietly. The expected response includes technical compliance paired with practical obstacles, complex ordering systems, restrictive qualifications, and subtle pricing strategies. Another approach will be increasing reliance on software and system integration to maintain control. At the same time, some brands are exploring partnership models with independent repairers, creating certified programs that maintain oversight while complying with the law. But the most significant part of the directive lies in a single clause. Manufacturers cannot refuse to repair a product simply because it was previously repaired by an independent. This directly challenges policies that effectively exiled vehicles from official service networks. For a company like Bugatti, which has historically taken that stance, it represents a fundamental shift. From mid-2026 onward, and they must at least consider working on such vehicles if it's technically feasible. What started as one rebuild project has become a defining example in a legislative battle. The broader message is simple. Ownership should include the right to repair. The law doesn't make every repair easy, but it removes the ability of manufacturers to block access